President Trump had an absolutely amazing week last week. I would hate to be a Democrat. He's doing even more as we start off the week. To help me go through this, I have Rod Martin. Rod, thank you for joining me again.
Great to be here.
So Rod Martin is the founder and CEO of Martin Capital. He's regularly asked to go on major news networks to talk about MAGA, Trump, as well as economic issues. Let me jump into this story with you. President Trump announced that he might be leaving NATO. The first move seems to be 5,000 troops taken out of Germany. So he's not canceling NATO at this point, but he is definitely moving the chess pieces on the board. Now the European Union is saying, hey, we need those troops to make sure that Putin doesn't march on Berlin. And the European Union is crying that they're going to lose billions of dollars in revenue and that they need that. Your thoughts on everything going on?
Well, the latter is more true than the former. They don't believe Putin's going to march on Berlin. They know as well as we do that Putin hasn't been able to get to Kiev in 4 years. He's not marching on Warsaw. He's not marching on Paris. That's just silly. So what they really are saying is, if you pull these bases out, now, first, that's going to cost our local economies just a ton of money, billions and billions of dollars a year lost. And second, we know you're going to have overseas bases, and we're actually pretty replaceable. So I was just talking to Colonel Rob Manus this morning, about his time in Morocco. And, we used to have 5 bases in Morocco. Morocco is a close ally. Morocco is part of the Abraham Accords. Morocco is the first country in history to recognize the independence of the United States, all the way back in 1776. So we like Morocco. Morocco's nice. The weather is good. And oh, wait, it is exactly the same distance from the Air Force Base at Barksdale to Morocco as it is to Ramstein in Germany. So they're replaceable. Also, they speak with forked tongue. If they really were concerned about the Russian threat, they'd be saying, get these troops out of Germany, send them to Poland, send them to Lithuania. That's where they're needed. And of course, they don't want that because this is all about freeloading. Germany, France, Spain, Britain, worst offenders of all. In the German case, a few years ago, they showed up at a NATO exercise. Their troops were carrying broomsticks for lack of rifles. And I did a piece here a couple of weeks ago at the Rod Martin Report, rodmartin.org, on Britain's situation, where they have twice as many admirals as warships. Admirals. An admiral is supposed to command many ships. They have twice as many admirals as warships. And we just discovered that in 8 weeks' time, they can't get a single destroyer to Cyprus. We're not talking about the Falklands, 8,000 miles away. So these guys are not meaningful partners. We don't need their bases, although we would prefer to have them. We don't need their goodwill, although we would prefer to have it. What are they going to do to us? Take our birthday away? Are they going to put an army in Canada and invade Michigan? I mean, all of this is silly. And the truth is, this is a partnership that makes sense if they're partners. It is a welfare program if they're just dependents. And I don't want, as a U.S. taxpayer, to pay for Germany's welfare.
Wow, that's a great analysis. On my channel, I've been covering all this fraud, the abuse of welfare, all of these illegal immigrants flooding in. Over 80% of them end up living off of us. But man, that's a really, really great point. I mean, it got so bad that the King of England had to come over and basically bend the knee to America and say, we want to be your partner, but they're not behaving like partners. I mean, it was even worse than we couldn't use our own bases during this military operation with Iran. Some of these countries wouldn't even allow us to fly over their country. They wouldn't allow us to use our own military equipment. I mean, it was an embarrassment. As President Trump said, we just learned how many of these are actual paper tigers.
Yeah. And not just paper tigers, but active opponents to some degree. I don't want to say enemies. We're not enemies with any of these people. We have great relationships on a certain level with all of them, and we certainly want to maintain that. But opponents, I mean, we're in a conflict. You can argue about whether we should or shouldn't be. I understand the Europeans' perspective on it, but I don't agree with them. I think it's crazy. We're actually over there in part defending their oil. We don't import from the Persian Gulf. They do. We are dealing with an Iran that has been threatening access to the Strait of Hormuz, through which 20% of the world's oil flows, for 40 plus years. It is absolutely absurd that they would see this as, quote, to quote Mertz, not our war. Well, hey guys, Serbia was not our war. Libya was not our war, but we were there for you in both. Oh, wait, Ukraine is not our war. And you can say, well, but we want the Ukrainians to win. We don't want aggression to profit. I completely agree. But while we have sent hundreds of billions of dollars in material aid to Ukraine, our European friends have sent them a fraction of that, even though NATO is 32 countries, 31 without us. They have sent a fraction of the aid that we've sent to Kiev. They've actually sent twice as much money to Moscow in energy purchases. So I'm sorry, you're speaking with forked tongue. Germany, Starmer, France, all these guys, they say they want us to take care of Ukraine while they pay for Putin's invasion. That hypocrisy has to stop.
Yeah. Wow. What a great point. America, put up the money, put up the weapons. In the meantime, we're going to keep buying oil from Putin. The number one funder of this war is those energy purchases. Let me ask you this. Do you think that, coming out of this, I don't know what's going to happen with NATO, but specifically with the Abraham Accord nations, do you see them having a deeper relationship with the United States? Because President Trump did that amazing Middle East tour where they committed collectively trillions and trillions of dollars to our economy. Do you think this situation sours them or actually opens their eyes that if something big happens, America will have their back?
It really couldn't be going better. And, I talked about Morocco a minute ago. That's likely to figure much more heavily in America's defense architecture than you would have imagined it would a short time ago. But let's jump to the United Arab Emirates. First of all, they made peace with Israel. That's a good thing. All those countries have been in a state of war with Israel, legally speaking, for decades, which is just not helpful. I'm sorry. You can like Israel, you can dislike Israel, but we don't want wars that are going to suck in American troops, American money, all this stuff. We want peace. We want peace for them. We also want peace for us. UAE, they are an A-list partner. They have tremendous financial, technological, military, intelligence cooperation with us, with the Israelis. They are a force for moderation and good in the region. I don't personally want to live in Dubai like Tucker Carlson just bought a house in Qatar. That's not what I'm saying. I'm merely saying that this is a huge step in the right direction. And then last week, shocker of shockers, the UAE ditched OPEC. Now, some of your audience will be old enough to remember gas lines in 79 and 73 because OPEC, the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, embargoed the West at the height of the Cold War, greatly strengthening the Soviets because the Soviets, of course, made their money from exports of oil, just as Putin does today. So hiking the price of oil fourfold in 1973, and it never came down from that, and then increasing it again and again and again, and then another oil embargo in 79. really nearly pushed the West off the cliff when the Cold War was far from decided. So these are what Joe Biden would call bad dudes. I mean, they probably hang out with corn pop. It's really bad. And UAE just ditched them. Now, why does that matter? OPEC works as a cartel. They are there to artificially inflate the price of oil. That's their job. And to do that, the biggest producers have to be willing to export less than they're capable of to be able to reduce the overall global price. Well, right now, this has changed a lot from 40 years ago. Right now, the only two countries in OPEC that have the ability to meaningfully restrain their output, because, say, Iraq is actually a bigger producer than the UAE, but they've got to sell every barrel they can sell just to stay afloat. The only two countries that can really move the needle here are Saudi Arabia and the UAE. And the third one, of course, would be Russia. They're not technically part of OPEC, but they're part of what is called OPEC Plus. But under the sanctions regime, they can't do anything. So the UAE just knocked one of two pillars out from under a global geopolitical, geoeconomic nemesis that we have faced my entire lifetime. And that's massive. And it's because of this deepening alliance with the United States. So just to be clear, we have plenty of allies around the world, and we can go through long lists of them, people who are stepping up and doing things that count, from Japan to South Korea to Taiwan to the Philippines, Indonesia now, India now, which is a little looser, but it's meaningful. And of course, some of the Gulf states, and I mentioned Morocco, and a bunch of Eastern Europe, a bunch of our NATO partners who aren't old Europe are great. So why are we letting Canada freeload? It's just crazy. And they're going to have to get into the modern world where the foreign policy establishment in Washington doesn't see them as favored pets and starts expecting them to step up.
Yeah. Sticking with the oil, the UAE leaving OPEC was amazing. President Trump just signed this new Keystone pipeline, allowing, I believe it's Ottawa or Alberta, one of them. Alberta. Oh, okay. Ottawa's the enemy. Alberta's the friend. Okay.
Yes.
So Alberta, 500,000 barrels a day down through the United States. My question to you would be, President Trump keeps saying the gas prices at the pump are going to come down when we're done. I know that right now, a lot of people support him, but they're also feeling the pinch in their wallet. Your thoughts on where oil prices go and gas prices once this thing starts to clear up?
The war will be over long before the midterms. So I don't think it will be that meaningful in the fall. Second, there are so many other good bits of economic news. For instance, in March, we exceeded expected job growth by 300%. I mean, oh my gosh, when did you ever have a jobs report like that? Unbelievable. Capital expenditures are off the chart. Right now, that translates to construction jobs. Give it a few months, and it translates to long-term manufacturing jobs that rebuild a middle class that was gutted by the Clintons in the 90s. There was absolutely no need for us to ship all our jobs overseas, and the idea that, well, they can outcompete us on price. Yeah, but we can outcompete them on productivity. We can outcompete them on lots of things. This isn't as simple as dollars and cents on a ledger. And also, we have industries that actually need to exist in the United States for our own national security. That's coming back. Everybody told us it couldn't. There was even a movie called Primary Colors, which is a lightly fictionalized version of the first Clinton presidential campaign. And one of the most famous parts of the movie is him standing up and speaking to a group in New Hampshire about, your jobs will never come back. You know, I'm going to do something radical today. I'm going to tell you the truth, but we're going to retrain you and we're going to this. No, none of that happened. So now Trump is actually bringing back manufacturing jobs. They all said that was impossible. All of this is possible and now happening. And that $18 trillion in investment that he has recruited into the United States, much of which came from the Middle East, by the way, but a lot from Japan and actually a decent amount from Europe and a lot from South Korea and other places that see the American future and understand the benefit of building manufacturing in America to avoid our tariffs. And Trump has been clear. If you are making an effort to build plants here, we won't tariff you there either. So, he knows what he's doing. He's trying to rebuild an American future for blue collar workers who didn't get a gender studies degree and actually just want to be able to support a wife and kids like they used to be able to do in the 50s and 60s and 70s. And that's completely reasonable and feasible, and it's happening. So I feel good about the midterms with a little bit longer term. UAE pulling out of OPEC means that the structural price of oil necessarily will decline, probably take 18 to 24 months to really see the full benefit of that, but it's coming. Second, refinery construction here in the United States will significantly increase the amount of refined product that we produce. We are now the world's top exporter of refined product, which is amazing and awesome because that's money we used to send overseas that is going to American workers here. That's a big, big deal. But with more refineries, because we haven't built a new refinery in this country since the 1970s, with more refineries, we have the ability to flood the market with cheap gasoline and everybody's happy. And finally, as Venezuelan oil comes online again, as we build these pipelines into Alberta, we greatly augment that energy picture. Think of it more of a North American energy picture. We'll count Venezuela loosely because it's in the Caribbean basin. A North American energy picture that is able to supply our allies around the world, and they are no longer dependent on endangered supply from Russia or the Persian Gulf. That's just a better world. It's also a much cheaper world, and everyone will do better together, except our enemies.
Yeah, I don't want to be on the other side of that. What Trump has done, making us energy dominant, is really pretty brilliant. Let me ask you this. The Democrats took a major hit last week from the Supreme Court saying, hey, you can't draw or force people into Congress based on the pigmentation in their skin or the race that they declare themselves to be. It needs to be a meritocracy. If you have good ideas, you're going to be voted in. Then they start saying, Black people, Hispanics, they just had their vote cut off, just a bunch of garbage. Your thoughts on that ruling, as well as the Supreme Court is about to make a decision on making election day. No more mail-in ballots being counted for weeks or even months after. Your thoughts on these Supreme Court stories?
Well, racial gerrymandering was supposed to help Black people, but it certainly did not. First, 2/3 of Black congressmen are elected from districts that weren't racially gerrymandered. So the idea that white people won't ever vote for Black people is just as dumb as it was when we elected Barack Obama nationwide twice, with Blacks being only 12% of the population. Of course, America is past Jim Crow. It's just silly. But second, it's offensive. I mean, the idea that I have to have a white person to represent me or my issues aren't represented is somewhere between reprehensible and just stupid. I mean, if I could have, pick a major Black Republican figure, and if that man or woman were my congressman, I would go vote for him or her twice if I were a Democrat anyway, just once in the real world. There isn't any bias in these elections that we can measure anymore. That's exactly why the SPLC has to take leftist donor money and fund the American Nazi Party and fund the Ku Klux Klan. They have to do it because the Democrats' demand for racism greatly outstrips what anybody on the right is willing to supply. So this is a great ruling, but it also is a telling ruling, because the truth is it didn't do anything for black people. If anything, it ghettoized them. Black people in Louisiana, for instance, if those lines were drawn fairly, they would have a say in the election of 4 or 5 congressmen. Instead, they're all put in a ghetto together, and the party picks their congressman for them. So it's terrible for black people. You know who it's good for, though? It's good for the Democrat Party, because it spots the Democrats 21 House seats off the top every cycle. And that just ended. So we're going to have a much more competitive November, I think, for that reason alone. And the Democrats' hopes of redistricting, or rather of winning the midterms, probably just went down the drain. And the final piece of that, of course, being the DOJ made clear any state that's reticent about acting on this, like South Carolina was being tough, we're going to enforce this everywhere, nationwide. This is happening. So there will be redistricting. It will be racially blind. And that will be actually the implementation of the intent of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1975.
Yeah. It's awesome. I think it's going to have a major impact on the midterms this time. Of course, the U.S. Census, when it's done correctly in 2030, that is also going to have a major impact on behalf of Republicans. Where do you think the Supreme Court will end up with this? Election day is election day. No sandbagging. That's a sales term, but sandbagging all of these mail-in ballots to see how many you need. And then they count them for weeks or months, and 90% of those end up going to Democrats. Yeah,
it's just manifestly fraud prone. And I think that's where they'll come down. Now, is that a 6-3 decision? Is that a 5-4? Is that even a 7-2? It won't be a 7-2 on that one. I don't know, but I think we win, and I think we win because the fact that you keep counting isn't fair to anybody. It just creates more opportunity for people to do wrong. And this is not a hard concept. We all know that you're supposed to vote by a certain day. If you can't even be bothered to do that, you probably shouldn't be voting at all. I mean, this is not hard. If you show up for class several days late, you're going to get expelled from your college. This isn't really different. So especially with early voting, which I think is a bad idea because it's also fraud prone. But early voting plus an election day plus a bunch of time after that, you're just trying to make the process impossible to monitor. And I think even John Roberts is going to see that and say that.
Okay. Final question. You had put over on your X page that 6 New England states that voted 30 to 50% for Donald Trump have 0 Republican representation in the House, over in the House. Do you think this new rule with the gerrymandering, this upcoming election cycle, the new census, do you see that cartel being broken up and we actually see some red spots in those 6 states?
I don't think we have a lot of racial gerrymandering in New England. I could be wrong about that, but it is my sense that that's not really the problem there. The problem there is the hypocrisy. The Democrats want to talk about how terrible it is that Texas redistricted and that Florida is about to. Wait, guys, you guys only have about 2 states you can redistrict because all the rest are already maxed out in gerrymandering. You're exactly right. You know, we average around 40% of the vote in 6 New England states, and there's not a single congressional district that Republicans are competitive in. You know, that's by design. That's literally gerrymandering. And that's true in Illinois. And that's true in a lot of places the Democrats run. So, you know, should gerrymandering exist? Well, you know, that's a ballot box issue. The Supreme Court has said, state legislatures are free to do this however they want, as long as they don't violate equal protection somehow. And parties aren't entitled to equal protection in the way that individuals are. So, okay, it's permissible. It's inevitable. It's about time the Republicans got with it and played hardball. And if they do, we might actually see something come from the Democrats where we have a truce and we start drawing these lines more fairly. Now, I would suggest the same thing is true in Europe. If you're ever going to fix NATO, they have got to learn a tough love lesson that we're not going to put up with permanent freeloading to the tune of trillions of dollars. Those days are over. If the Clinton and Bush and Obama and Biden team wanted to do that, that's fine. We're not going back. So there need to be some tough lessons for some people, but the aim is not to be mean to anybody. The aim is to get back to some sense that fairness is important all around. And we are not just your sugar daddy, whether, we are the American taxpayer for the Europeans, or we are the American government spotting the Democrats a bunch of House seats and electoral votes to which they're not entitled. That's all got to stop. And Donald Trump is doing a masterful job of getting us there.
Okay. I agree with you there. Rod, if people want to follow you online, where can I point them towards?
Well, come to rodmartin.org. That's rodmartin.org, where we do daily geopolitical analysis. Fox Business calls absolutely phenomenal. We've got tens of thousands of subscribers for our long form content every single day, and also hundreds of thousands of followers on social media. There's a reason. So come to rodmartin.org.
Okay, I'll put that as close to the top as I can. Thank you so much. We'll have you on again in the future.
Looking forward to it.